Professor Kummer here, talking about outlining for our second essay. Now, in our outlining process, we will already have a thesis statement. So you're going to use a thesis statement, and just like in our last essay, we're going to use complete sentences for our topic sentences. Now, in a response essay, you are writing to a different audience than the author is writing to. Okay, you're simply responding, and so your audience may or may not be as familiar with the article as you are. So there are some things we need to take into consideration when writing an essay like this. First of all, just like every essay you'll ever write, you'll have an introduction. I always do an upside down triangle. If you're doing this on a computer, don't worry about trying to figure out how that works. Just write your thesis statement. Okay, I really want to stress again on your thesis statement for this essay, we are not writing about, let's suppose you're responding to an essay about cigarette smoking and how cigarette smoking is a bad thing. We're not writing about cigarette smoking, okay? The topic of our essay is the essay that we read. It's not the topic that essay was writing about. So for instance, my thesis statement, if I'm writing about this essay that was writing about how people shouldn't smoke, okay, my thesis statement is going to mention the author by name, the title of the essay or article by name, and I'm going to have some kind of an opinion on that, okay? Just want to make sure that's extra clear. Now, since we're writing about the article, specifically about the article, we need to go back to our brainstorming, clustering, or free writing and think about the points that the author brought up in the article. So we're going to respond to those points. Now, before we can respond to those points, though, we need to do this. We need to summarize. We need a summary of the article because your reader may not be as familiar as you are with this article that you just read. So you'll need a summary. So if you've summarized this article already, you probably have, because I generally have people summarize the articles they have to read. You can use that summary right here. However, make sure it's a really good summary. And remember that it needs to flow. Okay, so if you handed in a summary to me, assignment, don't just feel like you can copy and paste. Make sure, and you can copy and paste portions of it, but make sure it flows well. So you're going to have your thesis statement in the introduction. Your first paragraph is going to explain, just give me a general rundown of what happens in the article, what the author talks about, points the author makes, what was it generally about, okay? And you can see the instructions on how to write a summary in the other parts of our Blackboard page. After that, you're going to have multiple paragraphs and again, in your outline, you're going to have full topic sentences. Each one of these paragraphs is going to be commenting on some point or some aspect of the article that you're responding to. So maybe this article is about how people shouldn't smoke cigarettes, and maybe the author brought up how smoking cigarettes will lead to high blood pressure, okay? Maybe you feel like that's a really good point. So that will be what you write about in maybe the first paragraph after your summary. Now remember, you're going to have a full topic sentence, okay? So maybe your topic sentence may be something like, the author brought up the fact that high blood pressure is generally a result of smoking. And this is especially good for reaching his particular audience. Now you know who the audience is. But you can discuss why that audience, specifically who you know, maybe it's people between the ages of 20 and 40. Maybe you're going to talk about why those people would respond to that kind of information. Maybe you might say, I disagree. Maybe I think it's a bad idea to bring up high blood pressure. Or you may even say, I don't agree that high blood pressure is caused by cigarette smoke. Now, you may need to find some proof. You may need to do a little bit of research that maybe that's the outside source that you'd like to use, or maybe you can point to faulty reasoning that the author gave But you need to give a reason why you think what you think about the article. Again, this is not about the topic of cigarette smoking. It's about how the author made this argument. And you're going to do that for every paragraph. You're going to bring up something that the author said and why you think it was a good point, why you think it was a bad point, why you agree, why you disagree. It's really pretty easy as long as you're focusing on points that the author brought up and not just, hey, and not trying to make it into your own argument. You're just responding. You're not trying to write some different kind of essay. You're just responding to the essay that you read. You're proving that you read it, and you're providing your reader with information that they might need to know. But you're also saying, this is a point that the author brought up. This is why it made sense to me. This is why it didn't make sense to me. This is a point maybe that would make a lot of sense to the author's intended audience. And this is why it would make sense to that audience, or this is why it would not make sense to that audience. So you're going to have multiple paragraphs that talk about points that the author brought up and what you think about those points. Okay? Again, you're not going to plan your conclusion because a well-planned outline is a well-planned conclusion. Hopefully, you can see how this step is becoming more and more important as the semester goes on. Get into it. All right, get started.